All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 2 o'clock. Thank you to everyone for joining today. My name's Allison Bennett. I am the board's public information officer. With me today, I have John Wilbeck. He is the board's executive director. He's going to help monitor the chat box for any questions anyone has. So just a little heads up, everyone is going to be muted for the presentation. So if you want to ask us any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat box and we will get to it. This webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the board's YouTube channel and available that way as well. I will upload that as well as the PowerPoint slides to our website under the resources and the NBEA Lunch and Learn webinar series tab. And I will also send them as well when I send email verifications. If you're a licensee and you would like to use this for CE credits, please use the email attendance verification that I send. We're not going to be sending out any certificates. So if you want to use this for CE credit, please include that email that I send. It is anticipated that the board will give credit for this webinar, but as a reminder, the board doesn't pre-approve any CE offerings. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to go over the Board of Engineers and Architects, who we are, and when licensees are going to be needed on a project, and a few other relative information regarding those. All right, so the Board of Engineers and Architects has served citizens of Nebraska since 1937. Back in the 1920s and 30s, Nebraska witnessed several unfortunate events, including a dam collapse, flooding.
Are you muted?
I am not. I'm showing it on my end that I'm not. Can any of my end not coming
Hold on
through?
1 second, folks. Dean, can you hear me speak? Okay, so Kurt can hear both of us.
Can you hear me, John?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting some thumbs up over here, so.
Okay, I'm going to go back on mute since it appears folks can hear me.
All right. All right, so going back, like I said, we were established in 1937. There were some unfortunate events. There was a dam collapse, flooding caused by new but unproven water systems, a newly built schoolhouse that crumbled at its foundations. So we were created in 1937 to oversee the laws and rules governing the practice of engineering and architecture, to safeguard life, health, property, and promote the public welfare. So these incidents served as the catalyst for the creation of the board. All right, so we have 8 board members. We have 4 professional engineers, 3 architects, and 1 member of the public. One of the professional engineers and 1 architect must be a faculty member of the University of Nebraska. On our board, that is going to be Bruce Dvorak and Brian Kelly. Our board members are appointed by the governor for 5-year terms, and they're tasked with helping ensure the statutes and rules are upheld in Nebraska. So we got 2 primary missions. First is ensuring that architects and professional engineers are qualified to practice. So we make sure all of these individuals applying for these professions have the education, exams, and experiences required. And we also enforce the act, particularly those provisions that require architects and or professional engineers to be involved on a project. Typically, we see incompetence on behalf of a licensee or a member of the public designing and building a structure that requires licensees to be involved in the project's design. And some other issues that we see may include a continuing education audit failure and some ethical issues involving a licensee. But probably our most common one are project owners not engaging a design professional when one is required. And we will go over what all of that covers and looks like here upcoming. So the Nebraska Engineers and Architects Regulation Act, this is going to contain statutes and regulations that must be adhered to by the public and licensees. We are currently in the process of updating some of our rules. They are currently at the governor's office for final approval. Once we get notification, if they're approved, we'll send them off for printing. We will put those changes on the website and make them available for the public and licensees to be able to download themselves, and also just a summary of what's included in those changes. We will send it out on Facebook as well and an email blast too. So there'll be lots of ways everyone's going to be notified about it. And so one of these rules changes is going to be defining public works. This definition was taken from Black's Law Dictionary and defines public works as structures such as roads or dams built by the government for public use and paid for by public funds. So when are architects or professional engineers required on a project? So to determine if a design professional is required on a project, we first need to look and see if the work comprises of the practice of engineering or architecture. And then after that, we will look at if the work is exempt from the act to determine if a design professional is going to be required. So first, let's look at how architecture is defined. It's defined as providing or offering to provide design services in connection with the construction, enlargement, or alteration of a building or group of buildings and the space within and surrounding the buildings. So for an example, architects look at ADA codes, potential historical requirements, and aesthetics. The practice of engineering is going to be defined as any service or creative work that requires engineering education, training, and experience in the application of special knowledge of the mathematical, physical, and engineering sciences. So engineers are going to focus more on math, such as the calculated weight of materials, physics behind the structure, structural elements, snow loads, HVAC, and similar things of that nature. So if you have a project, you're not sure if it comprises of the practice of architecture and engineering, the best thing to do is going to speak with one of those licensees. And I will show you a good place to find one of those on our website here in a little bit. So are architects and engineers interchangeable? Listening to those definitions, they do kind of sound similar, may look like they do similar things when we look at plans, designs, drawings, technical submissions. But the practices of architecture and engineering are separate and distinct. Architects cannot practice engineering. Professional engineers cannot practice architecture unless they are licensed to do so. We do have several who are duly licensed as architects and professional engineers, but they are separate and distinct. And some projects may require one or it may require both design professionals. All right, so now that we've looked at the practice of engineering and architecture, what that is defined as, next we're going to look at if the work is exempt from the E&A Regulation Act to determine if a design professional is required. So exemptions and occupancy classifications. Years ago, our board decided what elements need to be taken into consideration when determining if a licensee needs to be involved in a project's design. First, we're going to take a look at new building projects. So occupancy classification, this is going to characterize a structure based on its primary usage. So for example, a home's main purpose is residential, hospital's main purpose is healthcare, education would be a school, things of that nature. This information is going to be found in the state building code, which is referenced by the board, code officials, and the fire marshal's office. Knowing the project occupancy classification is going to be an important first step in determining if an architect or a professional engineer is required on a building project. And if you are unsure about the occupancy classification, typically this is also given to you by the state fire marshal or a local code official. So exemptions. We have a list of occupancy classifications and the maximum building area in square feet that building can be without requiring an design professional. So this was developed by the board from state law. This is going to be board rule 10.3 in our handbook. Again, occupancy classifications characterize a structure based on its primary usage. Like we said, a school's main purpose is going to be education. A gym's main purpose is going to be assembly. This is going to be used to determine the maximum allowable building area that can be built without a licensed engineer or architect needed for that project. So what if we have multiple occupancies? Many structures have these multiple occupancies. Board Rule 10.3.11 states that any structure that contains 2 or more occupancies is governed by the most restrictive occupancy. So below we'll see we got a brew pub here, which has a factory, probably where the beer's made. Hazardous could be where hazardous materials are stored. Assembly could be a tasting room. Mercantile could be a little store where you can buy goods and merchandise. So here we have 4 occupancies. So based on Board Rule 10.3.11, we're going to go with the one that is the most restrictive. And see here we have that assembly, factory, hazardous, and mercantile occupancy classification. When we look at the maximum building area square footage, assembly is 1,000, factory is 5,000, hazardous there is 2,000, and mercantile is 3,000. So since the assembly is the most restrictive occupancy classification in this building, the entire building is going to be classified as an assembly occupancy. So for farm buildings, Board Rule 10.2.5, we have farm buildings shall be defined as an agricultural building. That's defined in the state building code as a structure designed and constructed to house farm implements, hay, grain, poultry, livestock, or other horticultural products. Very important in this, the structure shall not be a place of human habitation or a place of employment where agricultural products are processed, treated, or packaged, nor shall it be a place used by the public. So buildings that look like a barn or a shed, but are used for hosting receptions, a wedding, parties, anything like that, are not going to be exempt. Those are going to be assembly occupancies. Like we described earlier, an occupancy classification is based on its usage, not how it appears on the outside. So if it appears to be a barn, but on the inside it looks like something completely different, it is used for something different than how an agricultural building is defined, it is not going to be exempt. So again, here's our state statute. says the provisions of the ENA Act regulating the practice of engineering and architecture do not apply to the construction, remodeling, alteration, or renovation of farm buildings. So, like we said, as a farm building is defined, designed and constructed to house farm implements, hay, grain, poultry, livestock, and other horticultural products, is exempt from the ENA Act, regulating the practice of architecture and engineering, and if you would need a design professional on that. But again, if it is used for a purpose other than that, then it may not be exempt. Next, we're going to take a look at trades. So state statute, the practice by a qualified member of another legally recognized profession who is otherwise licensed or certified by the state or any political subdivision to perform services consistent with the laws of the state, training, and code of ethics of such profession. If such qualified member does not represent himself or herself to be practicing architecture engineering and does not represent themselves to be an architect or professional engineer. So for example, we could have a licensed mechanical, electrical, and plumbing tradesperson doing work within their scope who are competent to do that work would be exempt from the ENA Act, meaning you would not be required to retain a professional engineer to design that work. So Board Rule 10.6 states that if the responsible building official finds a hazard to life, health, safety, welfare due to unusual circumstances of the building or structure or an unusually large number of potential occupants in relation to the square footage of the occupancy, that building official may require plans and specifications to be designed and prepared by a licensee. Building officials can be more strict than the Act, but they cannot be less strict. So when looking at this now, if the work comprises of the practice of architecture and engineering, and the work is not exempt from the ENA Regulation Act, it's not exempt using any of the areas that we just looked at, design professionals are required. Again, if you are unsure about, like we said, the definition of engineering or architecture, if you are unsure if your project is in need of one, maybe you're unsure about an occupancy classification, if your work is exempt, the best thing you're gonna need to do is contact a licensee. So next we're going to look at when a design professional is needed on a renovation or addition to an existing building, structure, or work. So when looking at renovations and additions, those are renovations and one-level additions to an existing building, structure, or work are exempt from the Act if, first, that total impacted area is less than the occupancy classification. So you're going to need to know that occupancy classification and then looking at that square footage. And if the area of renovation or addition does not adversely impact the mechanical system, electrical system, structural integrity, the means of egress, and it does not does not change or come into conflict with the occupancy classification of the existing or adjacent tenant space, building, structure, or work. So when we talk about adversely impacting a renovation or addition, that could be if you are moving walls or a doorway, if you are updating or changing the HVAC, maybe there are some updates or additions to the structure, we're updating some electrical work, or like I said, if we're changing an occupancy classification. or come into contact with or come into conflict with the occupancy classification. All right, so first we're going to take a look at a renovation. So someone purchased a 5,000 square foot building occupancy and they want to renovate half of the building. They want to add 2 offices and a restroom. So first we need to look at that occupancy classification. Is this over the square footage maximum? The exemption level for business occupancy is 3,000 square feet. And so the renovation space is 2,500 square feet. So that's good. We don't have to worry about that occupancy square footage because it is less than that business occupancy. So next, let's look at if the mechanical, electrical, or structural systems are being adversely impacted. Are we changing any egress? So the exterior doors and windows are staying the same. However, the owner wants to move a structural beam within the 2,500 square foot that supports the entirety of the 5,000 square foot. So now we're going to be adversely impacting the structure of the entire building based upon moving that structural beam. That's going to affect the whole building, and now licensees may need to be involved. All right, so looking at an addition. So here we have a 2,500 square foot addition to a 5,000 square foot building. Both are classified as business occupancies. So again, first, looking at if the renovation is over the occupancy square footage maximum. As we said before, business occupancy maximum square footage is less than 3,000 square feet. And then are we changing or impacting the mechanical, electrical, or structural systems? Are we changing any egress? So it's being built with its own structural support. It has separate mechanical and electrical, and no changes to egress. Based on that information, a design professional may not need to be involved. However, let's say that the 2 buildings share a structural wall, electrical and mechanical systems, and the exterior door is changed to an interior door. More than likely, we're going to need to get a design professional involved. We're adversely impacting the structural, electrical, mechanical, and changing of egress. All right, so next we are going to look at design professional seals. So when we say seal, the seal is going to identify the licensee responsible for the work. The seal is going to be the stamp, signature, and date. All seals must be legible, whether embossed, computer generated, or otherwise, signed across the face of the stamp with the licensee's name. That can be a computer-generated signature. It can be a wet signature. We just need to make sure, again, that is legible. And date on which the material was signed. So that when we say a design seal, it encompasses all of that, the stamp, the signature, and the date. So here are what our seals should look like. For an architect, it's going to say architect across the top, state of Nebraska at the bottom, with the architect's name and licensee number. If yours still says registered architect or something different than that up top, more than likely you're going to need to get a new seal. The engineer one is going to have the professional and then the discipline in the middle. So it could be civil, mechanical, structural. and then engineer, state of Nebraska at the bottom with the engineer's name and license number. In the absence of legibility, the seal is invalid. So here we have John and Jane Doe. They signed across the name, their seal across the stamp, and they have the date on which that was signed. We can still read everything. So these look pretty good to us. So a couple other seals that we may see are going to be a temporary permit. Temporary permits allow out-of-state design professionals to work on one project not to exceed 2 years in Nebraska. If that project goes over 2 years, they will need to obtain a Nebraska license. And so this is going to be on just one project, not to exceed 2 years. John Doe over here, he's going to use his Missouri seal. So they're going to make sure that they use their out-of-state seal. And then when they stamp everything, they must also provide the permit information below the seal, wherever the seal appears. So John Doe has his name, permit number, the temporary permit expiration date, the project name, and project location. So we're going to need to make sure that when we are sealing these with a temporary permit that we include the permit information below the seal, wherever the seal appears as well. Next up is a coordinating professional. A coordinating professional is required when more than one design professional is involved. A coordinating professional can be a licensed professional engineer, architect, or landscape architect recognized as such by the project owner. So if you have 2 professional engineers, a professional engineer and an architect, 2 architects, 10 architects, 10 engineers, 10 landscape architects, you're going to need someone designated as the coordinating professional. So whoever that individual is that is designated as the coordinating professional must use the following language in conjunction with their individual seal for identification. So Jane Doe below here, she has the I and then the name of the licensee, and the coordinating professional on the, and then the project name. So the point of a coordinating professional is to signify the main point of contact for code officials or other professionals. And their seal, signature, and language must be on the cover sheet of all of the technical documents. So I know we've had some confusion in the past about a coordinating professional, whether or not this is new. It's not new, it has been around for a while, or whether or not this requires any special education or anything like that. That is not the case. It just needs to be a licensed, Nebraska licensed professional engineer, architect, or landscape architect recognized as such by the project owner. So professional engineer seals. Nebraska is pretty unique. We are actually one of the few states that license engineers in specific disciplines. However, a licensed professional engineer can practice in any discipline of engineering in which they are competent to practice through training, education, and experience. So you can get licensed in more than one discipline, but you don't have to be licensed in that discipline to practice. So some common overlaps that we see are civil and structural, civil and environmental, and architectural, mechanical, and electrical. Just always reiterate to make sure that you have the training, education, and experience to practice in that discipline, because if anything ever happens, if you are practicing structural and something that happens, there's some alleged incompetence, it will get called into question. It may get called into question, and you will have to show that. So if you are submitting documents to a government agency, sealing is going to be required, including if you are submitting for a permit. If the work is clearly, highlighted the word clearly, marked as a draft, a seal is not required unless that agency requires it. So make sure that it is marked very clearly, draft, so that it is easily being able to be seen and for people to be able to notice and catch that it is a draft, especially if it's not being sealed, and it is needed to if it's not marked draft. So a seal, these are going to be placed on all originals, copies, tracings, or reproducible drawings. The first and last page of specifications, reports, and studies. Now a new board policy and one that is also sent for proposed rule changes that's at the governor's desk now is regarding large specifications. So it's not uncommon for licensees to work on large scale specifications, technical submissions, reports. If that's the case, licensees can affix their seal and indicate the page numbers they are responsible for on a separate sheet of paper. So if you have, like I said, the multiple licensees, they can put their seal on this page, put the page numbers that they're responsible for on that. Each individual will do that. And then that page must be put on both the front and back of that specification book. We know that it can be cumbersome, it can be a lot of work when you have these large specifications to seal each page. So this is a way that the board looked at it to make it a little easier on behalf of the licensees. All right, so next we're gonna touch on enforcement. So when a complaint is received by the board in which a person or organization is alleged to have violated the act, or if the board becomes aware of a compliance issue that may violate the act, the board may refer the complaint or the compliance issue to a committee or an investigator, or it may consider the complaint or compliance issue without such referral. So anyone can file a complaint with the board about projects built or renovated in Nebraska if it is suspected that there is a violation of the act or board rules. The board has received complaints from property owners, city and state officials, clients, licensees, members of the public. So like we said, some of these complaints include if there are projects built or renovated in Nebraska and there's a violation such as it may need a design professional involved, if it's not exempt from the act, maybe they have invalid seals. Additionally, if maybe there is professional misconduct on behalf of a licensee. So to uphold our missions and goals, we work very closely with other state agencies and officials across the state that share our mission in protecting the health, safety, welfare of the public. And so by working with these agencies and officials across the state, we can ensure we're getting out the correct information to the correct people so that we are serving the public to the best of our abilities and keeping them informed. So the complaints can be filled out. Complaints can be filed with the board by completing this complaint form, which is available on our website. The information is not public. It will never be shared with anyone regarding who is submitting the complaint. It will never be shared with the public, with the individual the complaint is being filed against. You're going to want to detail the alleged violation, such as who was involved, the project address. You're going to want to be as detailed as possible, provide as much information. Some of that can include if there's any contracts, technical documents. And so once we receive this complaint, board staff will typically contact you within 1 week of receiving this complaint to verify the information, if we have any additional questions regarding the complaint. And once that is finished, we'll review the allegations, have the board take a look at it, and they will decide if there is probable cause of violation has occurred. So once we receive this complaint, the compliance officer is going to reach out to the complainant to gather more information. Once the process is gone through, this information will be gathered and presented to the board. The board is going to have the option to either close the complaint or initiate a case and remediation on the project. So remediation, this is going to involve the project owner engaging an architect and or professional engineer to review the project and see if there's any concerns to public safety, health, and welfare. If that remediation professional determines that there are some deficiencies, they're going to recommend design solutions to remedy the issue of the project. The project owner must remove the deficiencies identified by the remediation professional. So once the project's been remediated, the remediation professional will complete a final letter to the board stating so. If there are no deficiencies found, the remediation professional will inform the board, and typically the complaint will be closed. So we stated here the project owner must remove the deficiencies that the remediation professional identifies. So what if the project owner receives those deficiencies and fails to comply with this process? So state statute says that if a person or organization has committed a violation, that one or more of these actions may be taken against the person or organization. We got issuance of censure or reprimand, suspension of judgment, place the offender on probation, civil penalties, cease and desist order, imposition of costs as in an ordinary civil action in the district court. For the most part, the board does not take action, but if someone chooses to not comply with the process, have that professional come out, review the project, the board has the ability to take action against the project owner. Ultimately, the goal of remediation is to get that professional involved, identify those deficiencies, and get them fixed so that we're keeping the public safe. And if someone is refusing to comply with that, the board has the ability to take action. So the cost of noncompliance, if you follow the act, you can have your property being protected, protect people on your property, and prevent damage or liability from improperly constructed buildings. When the act is not followed, property owners and developers may be liable if a structure was built in violation of the act and may be subject to fines and civil penalties authorized by state statute. So it can help protect, the property persons on that property, prevent damage, liability, making sure that these buildings are constructed properly to keep everyone safe, prevent liability, any fines, civil penalties. All right, so we're going to go over some resources and materials available to everyone on the board's website. First is going to be our licensee lookup feature. This will allow individuals to search for a Nebraska licensee by their name, license or license number, location, and also search for organizations. So here's what that search feature looks like. It is updated weekly. It is typically going to be updated on the website on Wednesdays. You can go under type, you can search for professional engineer, an architect, an organization. If you are looking for a specific discipline, if you need an electrical engineer or a structural engineer, you can filter by that as well. Status, it'll show you if they are licensed, if it is expired, if it's revoked. You can also search by a specific individual by their first and last name or an organization. So this is a really great feature that we recommend often to individuals who may be asking about trying to search for a specific licensee, and we will always point them to this area and have them just search for whatever they are looking for using this. So FAQ section, this, like I say, always kind of combines those areas up top into kind of one area for easy access for everything. So first is going to have just a general broad overview about you needing a design professional on a project. Kind of what we went over today is going to look at those occupancy classifications, exemptions, renovations and additions. For the general public, this is going to cover working with the licensee, projects and buildings, exemptions like we discussed, the complaint process, how to file complaints, and remediation. For licensees, this is going to just kind of combine all of those sections for the architects and engineers into one about the licensing practice, continuing education, the licensee seal, if you need to update your contact information, if you are looking at going emeritus and what that process is like. Additionally, the remediation, enforcement, and complaint process, certificates of authorization, what that looks like, which additionally, like I said, if you don't know your certificate of authorization number, go to that licensee lookup feature, type in your organization name, and it'll come up with it. Temporary permits, like we kind of discussed a little bit before, and the use of titles. The last section is going to be for students. This is going to cover NCARB and NCEES, and it will go over the education, exams, and experience requirements to be licensed in those professions. Resources, you're going to have the Nebraska Professional. This is our monthly digital newsletter. This is typically sent out towards the end of each month. It will include important board updates, if there are any professional society updates, NCARB or NCEES updates, or any helpful articles related to the E&A Act. If maybe there's a compliance trend that we've been seeing, we will highlight that typically towards the top, and anything else that can be of importance, any public rules hearings, things of that nature will include in there. Our Lunch and Learn webinar series is going to be in there as well. So these are going to be held quarterly, and it will just include information on those webinars. It'll show any upcoming webinars, the information, registration links. Additionally, below that will include past webinars, which will have the PowerPoints for that and the YouTube videos. So like I said, we're going to be recording this. and I'll update it to YouTube. And then I will link that to this page for people to reference. Publications, those are going to have our brochures, such as we have a remediation brochure, a before you build brochure, and becoming an engineer or architect, and our handbooks on there. So you can download any of those digital publications. Additionally, if you would like any hard copies of them, there's also going to be an order button at the bottom. If you click on that, it'll pop up an email that'll get sent to me. You just type in, let me know what you need, how much of it you need, where to send it, and we will send it off to you for free. Latest news, this is going to give any upcoming information for like a webinar, if there's any important board updates, such as if there's our new handbook coming out, if there's been a policy update, we will include that on there. We can post any open positions on the board. If we have any board staff openings, we're going to post it there. Rules hearings, that's where a lot of that's going to be as well. And then links of interest. If you are looking for some information on any professional societies, anything on NCARB, NCAAS, we're going to have links to their sites as well. They will also have the websites to obtain a seal. So like I kind of mentioned before, if you have registered architect or if it has different language than that, just say an architect, we're going to have a link to several areas where you can get a new seal. Lastly, we're going to have the contact tab. This has all board staff on there, and each area that they oversee, that's their expertise. You click on it and it will pop up their information, and you can just send them an email right from there. It will also have our mailing address, our physical address, phone number, email addresses, any which way that you want to contact us, we got it listed under there. We want to make sure we're as accessible and available to help whenever you guys need. So if you're on social media, be sure to give us a follow. We post a lot of those updates on Facebook, post those YouTube videos, and this is just a good, easy way to stay in contact with us. All right, so that is going to do it on my end. If anyone has any questions, John, was there anything in the chat that you wanted to address that was maybe something for everyone?
There is, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm actually gonna, Allison, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share a presentation, just I want to go over a little bit more of the rules changes that are upcoming because I get the feeling there's a ton of licensees here who may be, it may be helpful to know what rule changes are coming down the pike. Um, so if you don't mind, I'm just gonna share
Go
um,
for it. I will
a
stop
little,
sharing mine.
yeah, no
Oh,
worries.
you
So,
got it.
okay. So let me get back to this chat question. Uh, the, oh boy. Yeah. Well, is asked a pretty long question about a C of A, and I just lost my chat box, and I don't know where it went. So um, I might have to get that question emailed directly to me and help answer that. But I know it was about C of A's. So if you can email that to me at john.wilbeck@nebraska.gov, I'll be able to answer that. But I wanted to go over some other rules changes that are in process. Again, the board has had a hearing on these. We've gotten feedback on them. Um, I think there's a couple rules we changed a little bit, but the AG's office has approved them, and now they're at the governor's office for approval. So once the governor's office approves these, it's just a formality after that. They become effective 5 days after the governor signs it. So wanted to go over briefly some of these. Um, One of those is, the education requirements for engineering license in Nebraska, at least initially, is a degree from an ABET EAC accredited um, program. NCAAS is starting kind of the initial stages of what I would term changing the NCAAS model law standard to include ETAC degrees, engineering technology degrees. Um, and we can see on the horizon, at least at the last NCAAS annual meeting, that ETAC holders would potentially be model law engineers if and designated as such on their NCS record. Our board does not believe that ETAC degree holders um, should qualify for initial licensure in Nebraska. So there's a specific rule about um, preventing anyone who we see an NCAAS record from who's applying for licensure, but they only hold an ETAC degree, not an EAC degree. They are not going to qualify for licensure here through the MLE provision. They're going to have to go a different route, either meet the education requirement another way, maybe through the NCAAS education standard, or wait until they're licensed in another jurisdiction for 15 years. So our board is included that rule in the rules package. Another one, NCAAS, you might not be aware, but they are setting up, NCAAS has set up an International Professional Engineers Register. Um, it is to help US-based engineers get licensed in other countries. And there's a certain list of countries on a couple international engineer agreements. So there's a pathway now for um, foreign engineers to get licensed in Nebraska. And at the same time, this the first one that NCAAS did was the United Kingdom. But there is an opportunity for folks who have an NCAAS record to help get licensed in other countries. One of the requirements is you do need an NCAAS record. But I just wanted to let all the engineers know that NCAAS is actively working on international pathways for reciprocal licensure between countries. So wanted to add that too. Switching gears to the code of conduct, I wanted to add that we have a provision currently that says a licensee who has knowledge of any violation of the EN Act or board rules shall report it to the board. We added an additional layer onto that rule to say that licensees, if they know of something, a problem with the act or board rules, not only do they have to report it, and now there's a clock. They have to report it within 90 days. Now, the rule doesn't say that you have to file a complaint with the board. All it says is you have to report it to the board and may report it to legal authorities. So I just wanted all the licensees to understand that there's now a clock on that rule. And when the governor signs that, that'll be law. Another one is this was had to deal with dealing with sealing large specification books, for some of the bigger projects. The way the sealing of specs was written, it was a little cumbersome. Like if you had, one licensee did division 1 and 2, maybe you had 2 or 3 licensees doing different spec sections in division 3. We had to seal the first part of the section and then the last part of the section. It could get a little confusing on big spec sections. So we are going to put a new rule in that says if there's a big specifications that has a lot of licensees where it can be kind of confusing to seal the first and last page of each section, we are going to specifically allow all the licensees to affix their seal on separate sheets, listing each section that licensee prepared. So I think we've given some informal guidance to firms that some people can do this, but we're actually making it a rule right now. So it's a little more black and white for you all. Switching gears to continuing education. There's that list back in Rule 931 that says, if you get all your non-live online hours um, from certain providers, there might be restricted. But there's some categories of, like, if you get all your pre-recorded webinars through these categories of providers, you can get all your CE courses through. We're adding AIA approved providers to that list. So you all know, and again, we're just waiting for board approval on that. But that's how we're going to kind of informally evaluate continuing education audits as of now for this upcoming period. So that's important for you to know. Also related to CE, this is another rule that the board will grant a maximum of 10 continuing education hours in any calendar day. So I want every licensee on this webinar to be aware that there's a 10-hour max for CE. You know, surprising or not to you, we used to get 12, 15, sometimes greater than 24 hours of continuing education in the day. The board realized there had to be some reasonable uh, limit to CE. We did get some feedback from NSPE and AACEC on this. And so we modified their rule to be in line with their feedback. And so this is another rule that is going to come into effect when the governor signs the changes. And I believe that's all the really significant rule changes to licensees are that will occur. We'll definitely let everyone know when those rule changes are signed into law. But again, we're just waiting for the governor's office. Not much we can do until he sits down and actually reviews it and signs it. So that's all. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, John. So we'll wrap it up here. If there's no further questions, we appreciate everyone attending. Again, if you are a licensee, it's anticipated the board is going to give CE credit, but again, we don't pre-approve CE offerings, and I'm not going to be issuing a certificate for this. If you participate in the entirety of the presentation, I'll send you an email within the next week confirming your attendance. And if you would like to submit it for CE credit, be sure to save that email and use it if you are selected for an audit. And I think if John doesn't have anything else, I think that'll do it for us. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Stay tuned. We will be having another one of these before the end of the year. I'll be posting them, sending it out. Make sure everyone knows about it. Thanks, everyone.